After e4, knight f6, black is playing the Alekhine Defence, knight c3, d5, and now e5 comes. So in this video we're going to go through something we haven't seen before, which is, okay, after knight e4, we know we play knight c2, e2. For more information, go and watch the other video of this saga. Here the idea, as mentioned already, if black plays c5, for example, right, d3 just traps the knight. So that's just so you understand that d3 is a very strong move by white. It depends on what black does. So let's look at knight c6 now. d3 comes anyway, and black goes to knight to c5, only move available. Now we play d4, and in the previous video we went through knight to e6 and everything that happens next. Make sure you check that out. In this video we're going to go through something we haven't seen, which is knight to a4. The idea with this, it's something that can happen. The opponent, the black player, has an idea of playing knight b6 and knight c4, put the knight in a nice square. So it's kind of trying to make you play b3, but that would be bad, since this will make the dark squares on the queen side a little bit weaker, and after the black player moves and plays e6, this bishop will be a little bit stronger. So and it wouldn't be really, it's kind of a dopamine move. The knight will just go back. You don't need to play b3. Play c3, and now you're creating this pawn chain, and that's a much better thing. Now our opponent plays the knight to b6, and now you can continue with knight to g3. Okay, black will have to continue development. The bishop doesn't have anywhere to go that makes sense unless bishop d7. So bishop g4 is not possible. So after e6, normal developing move, a4 is the idea of the white player. Our opponent doesn't have to worry about a5 because knight can go to c4, which is the whole point. So let's go on with development. Bishop to e7, the only place to develop the bishop. Bishop to d3, and that's how we're going to be playing. This is why you can say the white player is already much better. The reason being that moving of the knight all the time allowed us to create this really nice pawn chain. It's really strong, and the bishop is attacking this square, and we have a pawn attacking the square f6. Black doesn't have a knight in f6, meaning that we have a strong attack over h7. h7 is more vulnerable. Okay, castle, queen to h5. So castle is wrong. There was nothing there, because you see h6 now just doesn't work. You're gonna play bishop queen h5 anyway. h6 to stop the checkmate. Okay, you might argue g6. We'll see it in a second, but obviously you know what to do. If h6, then bishop takes a sacrifice, and you're winning material. Also threatening to take this pawn as well, or simply bishop to g5 with the threat of h7. If pawn takes, queen takes back, and now the best move by black. If black plays only top engine moves at this point, he might survive, but still will be losing. So f5 now is the best move, cutting off the attack of the bishop. Queen g6 check, king moves, knight to h5, threatening mate in g7. The rook cannot go to g8 because the queen goes to h6, and that's mate. So rook to f7 is the only move by black to stop the checkmate from happening. You take the rook. Now queen to f8, removing this very strong initiative and also stopping the checkmate from happening. And the best move is to take. So take back, knight to e2, continue development. So we're up the exchange. We should be winning this easily. Bishop d7. We also up 2 pawns. Let's just go on how, to see how the game more or less goes. How to quickly consolidate and win the game. a5. The knight will have to move. Knight to c4. Take. Knight f6, attacking the bishop. Rook developing and defending the bishop. g4. The idea is to play g5 and then h4, h5, g6, and so on. If pawn takes, simply h3. And now you're going to take this pawn and develop the rook. And you can play king d2, the other rook is coming, and you checkmate soon. If pawn takes, the same thing. If pawn pushes, you take back with the pawn, and you still have 2 passed pawns, completely winning the game. And even then, if our opponent, after we played g4, even if our opponent hadn't taken back and played just bishop e7, for instance, so you just play g5. So that's the intention of the pawns, is to go forward. Another thing that had to be said, so that we can close this saga, well, there could be some extra videos maybe in the future, for sure. Every time I make a video that's called Final Chapter, it really is the end, in a way that, everything you're supposed to know to deal with specific opening or defense. But there could be some extra videos, some extra lines and material regarding some specific position that occur a lot. So let's go through this now. e5, as you know now, d4, right? We've seen something similar in one of the previous videos. Okay, now you know you have to take the knight, they take your knight, you take the pawn, they take this pawn. I mentioned already why taking this in b2 is completely wrong, because if black takes here first, you can take here and that's game over. This pawn is making a fork, and it's a very, very silly way to play for black, so that's not going to happen. The black player knows here. Obviously, taking in g7 doesn't make sense because you just up a pawn, you're completely up a pawn. Now, obviously, if you take with the d pawn, the queen can take back, and then you lose your right to castle. But to be fair, that's actually the most accurate way to continue the game, because you see, you don't really need to take with the d pawn, and now you've created a majority here already on the queen side. So after take, you lost your right to castle, but you're up a pawn, and after the castle and knight f3. Rook to d8. Position is just better for white. Not that much. It's just the opening and the queen's off the board. But you're just going to play bishop d2 now. The bishop is defended by the knight, so you don't have to worry. If at this point, if black plays bishop to g4, the idea of taking this knight and ruining our pawn structure, we don't even care. So remember this pattern. You just go on with development of the two bishops. It's an open game. And if bishop takes here, it's actually really bad, because if pawn takes back, rook to g1, it's a fantastic rook. The black player, remember, doesn't have the pawn in g6. Besides, he's just going for a better endgame. So there's no way for black to actually play like this. So you see, bishop g4 is a bad idea because of the g file. So what if black plays knight to c6 and the usual moves? Just developing, he play king to c1. Okay, bishop e6 developing. Maybe an idea of rook d7 and rook to d8 and conquer the open file. Bishop to e2. And look, the game is open. There's too many things that can happen, so I'm not going to be able to go through any idea, because black could do anything. Like black can just play like here, but you know, a5, a4, but it wouldn't do anything because we have a majority against minority. So whatever plan black has, white is just much better. The only idea here to mention is that the only idea here to mention is that white has an idea of playing a4 and then a5 and then get the rook up, or you're going to play a6 as well. So that's the idea of the white player. And the white king remains in c1, completely safe. You don't have to worry about any attack, simply because the queens are off the board. If rook to d7, the idea of double up the rooks and just bishop e3. You go on with the extra pawn. So let's finish mentioning what we need to talk about. Here, after d5 and e5, we need to see this move. This is tricky. Knight f to d7. You can tell that this is a bad move, and you can tell how natural it is to play d4. But now here, what you need to do is, instead of going through the massive amount of theory, after c5 is really annoying move. And now here, taking in c5 means you lose the pawn in e5. This is better for black. Taking in d5 here falls for a trap, because now black can take the pawn in d4 and also has an attack over the pawn in e5, and now you're gonna get defensive here, and it's not good also because even if you protect the pawn in e5, then take, but then the queen can take this knight, and so that's not good. It's better for black actually. Taking the pawn in d4 here is a trap. Knight to b6 wins already for our opponent, and I personally fell for this trap myself some years ago. And I just came across this whilst I was preparing for this video, and I just remember, I'm 100% certain that I fell for this, because it's impossible now. If you move the knight, you lose the queen. If you move the queen, you see there's double attack on the knight, and black is threatening e6, so you can't even protect the knight, let's say, with pawn to c4, because e6 is just happening, and you're gonna lose material. So let's take it from the start, and let's see what the best move is in this position. After knight d7, you play d4, and after c5, you play f4. And this is now after black playing e6 or knight c6, whatever. You're going to play knight f3, and this is a perfect transposition into a French Steinitz. So in this position, f4, and this is a French Steinitz. And you might say, what do? I don't know how to play against the French Steinitz. Well, I made videos about that, so you go and become a French. So go and watch these videos. It's a huge repertoire. You learn exactly what to do against the French Steinitz. If not, well, then you're going to have to find another way to play this. But there's no point. I mean, it's good to know what to do against the French, so that even when they play the Caro-Kann or the Alekhine, then you can just recreate a pattern that you already know. So here, what to do? When our opponent takes in d4, you might argue that this move here already removes our possibility to play the French Steinitz. but in reality you still can. The move here is not queen to d4, because then we wouldn't be playing that, then knight plays c6, you're gonna have to move the queen again. You can play queen d5, but black can first play e6 and then knight c6, and you don't want to play bishop b5 to attack the knight, because he can be kicked out with a6 and then b5, and a6 and b5 are perfectly reasonable moves for a French Steinitz player. So what you do here is knight to b5, alpha 0 move against the French Steinitz when Stockfish played it. So the idea is to take back. Now you can say, okay, what if knight to c6, protecting? That means if we take, black takes back, we take back with the queen, and it's still fine, but black is planning to play e6 and bishop c5. It's annoying. What you do is now you go on with development. Knight f3, e6, okay, and now you take. And that's it. You now have a Steinitz, because if black plays with the knight, takes queen d4 with the knight, you can take back with the knight, which is exactly what you will do when the French Steinitz play does it to you. So bishop to c5, and you can carry on however you prefer. You can play bishop e3, you can play c3. c3 is the most accurate move here, because you see, usually when you play the Steinitz, your knight is still, when you play against the Steinitz, your knight is still in c3. In this case, your knight went to b5 and then d4, so c3 is the most accurate move. And you basically, you're playing against the French, so make sure you watch all my videos against, how to beat the French defense, and you will know exactly what to do. The last mention before closing the Alekhine saga is, so after knight c3, we also mentioned how e5 by black now gives birth to a Vienna. You just play pawn to f4 if you're a Vienna Gambit player. I made over 20 videos about the Vienna, so you have a huge repertoire if you want. You can play bishop c4, play a normal Vienna. Anyway, we're gonna look at d5, e5, and now in the variation where they push, we know we take, they take us, we take in g7, they take us with check, only move, best move. Queen takes back, and now best move by black is queen takes. We explained this in previous videos. Bishop takes, and now bishop takes in g7. And this is the game that they want to play. Now, as we know, we have the castle long. The best thing to do, most active response, and after castling, knight to f3, and after bishop to f5, rook e1, and in the previous video, we went through all the things that can happen now, that can go wrong. We know exactly what the plan is, the g pawn going up, and so on. What if black plays, because remember, rook e8 was wrong. We go straight with the attack in g4, right? So what if black plays, because rook e8 is the idea is to defend the pawn in e7, we want to go there. What if black plays e6? Okay, now we play rook to g1, and we have the same idea. So in the previous video there was rook e8, and you will play g4. If black takes, then you can play rook g1, ignoring the knight, because when the knight gets taken, you play bishop h6 and you take it from there. Completely winning game for us. Now here, something that wasn't discussed was what happens after bishop to f5. I mentioned bishop h5 and everything that happened next. You're gonna play knight e5 and so on. What if bishop to f5? Okay, knight h4. And now the bishop will have to move away. What if the bishop goes to g6, which is obviously the only thing left to do, because you're threatening bishop h6, winning. Now here you play f4 with the idea of playing f5, winning the game on the spot, because you're winning material. So what and this, by the way, cannot be stopped with e6. You can just play f5 anyway. The pawn cannot take, because the rook, the pawn in e6 will be pinned. So how does black stop it? Can black stop it with f5? No, because bishop c4 comes with check. Go double attack over e6, so the pawn cannot push. And the game just plays itself here. And what to do? It's not like if the king moves to f8, this is a free bishop, pawn takes back, but at knight g6 is checkmate. So if the king goes to h8 instead, you take with the knight, pawn takes back, rook takes g6, with the idea of playing rook e3, rook h3, and checkmate is unstoppable at this point. So in this position, we mentioned once again from the previous line, from the previous video, rook e8. Here he played strong attack with g4, take, rook g1, and if bishop f5, we said knight h4. Now black's best defense would be to play bishop to g6, but you play pawn to f4, and it looks like it's game over. Black can't play e6, can't play f5. The best move by black, according to the engine, is bishop to f5. Obviously attacking this very important knight in h4. Okay, take the bishop. Pawn takes back, and now we're going to conclude the game with the bishop pair. The move now is f5, obviously. We're going to be putting enough pressure on that pawn. Pushing the pawn doesn't make sense, it just helps us develop the pieces. Black, let's say, continue development, knight d7, maybe a knight to e5, reaching some more decent squares, playing the other rook into the open file. Okay, take the pawn, pawn takes back. Rook takes with check, king f7. We gotta protect the rook. But we don't want to play bishop d3 because we want to keep the right to play bishop c4. So rook to h6 is the best move. And now we're just winning this endgame no matter what. Let's say rook to h8, seizing the initiative from the white player, forcing maybe a swap, is met with bishop c4 check. Pawn cannot really block because you can take it for free. And that's how you're going to be playing this game, because now the king will be forced to go, well, g7 is silly because you can check it with the other rook, and this rook is protected by the bishop. King goes back, then just to simplify, rook takes, bishop takes, rook to g1, threatening a skewer. Rook g8 will be game over. So knight to f6, stopping that from happening. The knight is protecting g8. Bishop to e6, stopping any movement from our opponent king. There's no way to develop anything now. a5, maybe the idea of playing rook a6, come into this file and come into the 6th rank. Just play bishop to c3. The idea, very simple, is to take the knight and then we have access to g8, winning the game. What if rook to a6? Just defending. Well, that also doesn't work because you're gonna play bishop takes knight. So in this position, as you know, we're attacking the pawn, which is why we went through rook e8 extensively. What if black plays e6? Now here the plan slows down a bit, but it's still better for white. We're gonna play rook g1. We don't have the immediate sacrifice of the pawn in g4. Because you see, if you play g4 now and you try to transpose into something, you know, like basically the same thing we did before, bishop g4, yes, you can play rook g1, and yes, the bishop cannot take the knight because bishop to h6 is a just better, much better endgame for white. The problem is that now our opponent can go to f5, and you just lost the pawn, even though this rook is strong, but black can play bishop g6, and you don't have anything. You actually don't have anything. You can say, okay, what about knight h4 and the same thing as before? Remember that there already is a pawn in e6, meaning that after knight h4 and bishop g6, you don't have the f4, f5 idea, because now there is no rook in e8 that you can exploit the pin of the pawn in e6, meaning that this pawn is protecting in f5. And black does have enough time to play king h8, rook g8, and it's just solid. And it, you know, it's still, its position is evaluated 0-0 at this point, right? So why would you go into 0-0 if you're supposed to take an advantage? Which leads us back to this position. Now here you don't have the immediate g4 pawn attack. You have to play rook g1, and now you do have g4. g4 is a good idea now. Let's make an example. If black plays knight to d7, the idea of going to f6, and then, you know, being the best square, because eventually maybe reaching d5, or maybe even from b6 and at d5, you play g4. So that was going to happen no matter what. Bishop to g6, h4. And now h5 is a very strong move, obviously, as you can tell. So h6 stopped that from happening. But the attack is inevitable, h5. And now black has to play bishop to h7, but now g5. And you're opening everything up, so you have to take, but this is now, it's now just so much better. Black takes, bishop takes back. The pawn can't ever push because, you know, after, you know, you got ideas of bishop h6, and even after all the swaps, you know, when the pawn is gone, you can play rook e6. So after king h8, let's look at this idea. The idea to play rook in g8. The best move is rook to d1, threatening this knight. So the black player will have to wait before playing this move. So knight to f6. What happens now? Looks like you know, the black player will survive this attack, but h6 wins. Okay, so f6 was a problem. Well, what if instead, you might argue, what if our opponent just saves the knight, goes to, I don't know, b6, right? Remember that h6 remains a possibility no matter what. And also you have to consider that this bishop is pinned after h6. Also, f6 is not a counterattack because you can take the bishop with check. So back in this position, we were threatening g4. So you might argue, what if our opponent just plays h5 now to stop it, and then plays maybe something like king h7, rook g8, you know, and continues the game. It doesn't look good, but at least black is not going to suffocate. Well, the attack is going to happen anyway. H3. And then we're going to play G4, open the files. And black needs to start praying. Knight to F6 to put more attack over G4. Well, G4 is happening no matter what. Because you see, after pawn takes, you can take back. And yes, there's 2 pieces here, but still, we're interested in opening the files. We're not interested in anything else. Pawn takes, and after bishop takes, you might think, okay, the bishop at least comes with an attack on the knight. And maybe our opponent will survive the attack on the king. But now here, white wins with bishop to c3, threatening an attack on this knight and then going for g7. And the knight can't just play to h5, for example, to defend this bishop, because then this bishop falls. So in this position, what if black takes with the knight? Okay, well, bishop h3 wins a piece. And even if black just moves the knight away, you can take the bishop. And then bishop h6 will end the game. Okay, then instead, what if after g4 our opponent doesn't take us at all? Bishop to g6. Okay, well, knight to e5. And after taking this bishop, you're going to have very weak black pawns. And, you know, you can go for it straight away. You're winning the endgame. Bishop to h7. What if the bishop now realizes and, you know, needs to go there? But now you just play pawn to g5. Knight to e8. Our opponent will dream of finding some freedom. But now you just play g6. Crazy enough. I thought that the best move here was going to play knight d7. But, you know, when you have a very strong knight, you don't care about the opponent rooks. You just play g6. Because obviously it comes with an attack on the piece. So bishop can't just take our knight. So the knight d7 threat remains. If pawn takes, which gives some freedom to the black rook, maybe rook f2, this bishop is locked, but at least our opponent can try to start dreaming of surviving this. Bishop c4 comes and attacks this pawn, and that's going to be it. We're going to put a lot of pressure on that. And a move like king to h8 to try and play bishop to g8 is never possible, simply because knight g6 check. Bishop takes, rook takes, and you've got too many winning ideas.